What if everything you ever wanted was the very thing keeping you caged? They never told you the cost of wanting, only the reward, only the wait, only the wait. So you chased, you conquered, you bled for things that shimmered in the distance, and when you finally held them, the house, the title, the silence after applause, it felt empty, a quiet, heavy emptiness. Like waking up in a palace with no windows. You did everything right, and yet something feels deeply wrong. Because here's the truth they never taught you. What you crave owns you. Need isn't desire, it's dependence. And dependence is a cage. No matter how golden it looks from the outside, most men never question the leash. They polish it, they parade it, they call it success. But you're not most men, not anymore. You've felt the hollowness, you've seen the trap, and something in you is done being owned, done being pulled by invisible strings. You're ready to stand still, unshaken, untouched. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You don't need more, you need less, until there's nothing left to lose. You were born into a prison, not with walls, not with chains, but with expectations. From the first breath, the world whispered what you should become. Be strong, be successful, be someone, and without knowing it, you obeyed. You learned to perform, to smile when you were tired, to compete when you were empty, to chase more when what you had already felt like a burden. They taught you to keep building, but never to ask why. You became a man in the eyes of others, but not in your own, because deep down you always sensed the truth. You weren't living freely. You were living obediently. This prison is harder to see because it looks like the world. It rewards you, applauds you, distracts you with praise, with progress, with polished mirrors. And so the cage tightens. Softly, you start measuring your worth by numbers. The size of your house, the reach of your name, the weight of your investments, the admiration of strangers. You wear ambition like armor, but inside, you're tired. You crave rest, but you fear stillness. Because in the silence, you might hear the question, what if all this was never yours to begin with? You've confused movement with meaning, success with sovereignty, validation with value. But here's the quiet horror. Most men live there, entire lives in this invisible prison, and they never leave, because they never know they're trapped. They decorate the cell. They hang achievements on the wall. They fill the space with luxury, status, noise, but the bars remain, and those bars are made of need to be seen, need to be liked, need to be important, need to be more. The more you need, the more you obey. Not from fear of punishment, but from fear of being nothing. That is the root of modern slavery. You are free to move, but not to stop. You are free to rise, but not to walk away. You are free to succeed, but not to reject the game. And that's why most men never become powerful. They become dependent on systems, on approval, on appearance. They gain the world and lose their grip on themselves. Epictetus once said, "Only the educated are free, not the rich, not the admired, not the praised, the educated. the man who has seen the game and chooses not to play it, the man who has stripped life down to its bones and still stands whole. That man cannot be manipulated. He cannot be bought. He cannot be broken, because when you need nothing, you fear nothing. And when you fear nothing, you are free. This isn't about rejecting success. It's about removing the leash from your success so that you own it instead of it owning you. The invisible prison isn't around you, it's inside you. In the thought that says, I'll be enough. When? That's the lie. That's the cage. That's the war you were born into. And no one escapes by accident. You must burn the blueprint they gave you. You must face the silence. You must sit with the discomfort of not being more until you remember you were never less. Let others chase. Let others beg. Let others decorate their cages. You were not made to kneel. You were made to stand even when you stand alone. There is a hunger that no meal can satisfy, not because food is scarce, but because the hunger isn't real. It's created, manufactured by a world that profits from your emptiness. From the moment you open your eyes, the craving begins. To check, to scroll, to compare, to want. You don't even know what you're looking for, but you keep reaching, as if some digital relic will finally complete you. This is no accident. This is the system. Feed the man lies, starve his soul, and watch him beg for crumbs from the table of illusion. You've been told your desires are natural, but they are not. They were planted, curated, strategically designed to feel like your own, but they are not your voice. They are echoes of marketing, of culture, of fear. The craving is not just for things. It's for attention, validation, certainty, comfort, control. But the more you chase them, the weaker you become, because every craving teaches you one thing: you are not enough without it, and that is the beginning of your collapse. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because when you stop performing for others, you begin living for truth. And truth does not crave. It does not compete or beg or dress itself up for applause. It just is, like a mountain, still, unmoved, complete. But craving turns you into something else, restless, reactive, a puppet pulled by every shiny string, and soon you don't know who you are. Without the craving, you've built your identity around the chase. And if it ever stopped, what would be left? That's the curse. To feel alive only in pursuit, never in stillness, never in being. But here's what they never told you. Desire is not power. Desire is dependence. The man who needs nothing is not cold, he is clean. He walks lightly, speaks little, and acts from a place the world cannot touch. He may lose wealth, but he cannot be made poor. He may lose love, but he does not collapse into loneliness. He may lose status, but he does not lose himself, because he was never held together by those things. You too can become that man. But first, you must feel the weight of your craving. Not judge it, just see it in its raw, needy form. See what you grasp for when you're alone, what you run from when it's quiet. What you can't stop thinking about when nothing's wrong, yet you feel incomplete. That is your leash, that is your cage, and that is your invitation to step back, to breathe, to sit with the ache without feeding it. Yes, it will scream. Yes, it will lie. Yes, it will try to convince you that silence is death, but silence is birth. Craving is the scream of the false self. It cannot survive the stillness, so be still. Let it die. Let it burn away everything that isn't truly yours. And what remains, that quiet presence beneath the hunger, that is where your power lives, unshakable, unbothered, untouched. There comes a moment in a man's life, not marked by age but by awareness, a moment when the noise of the world fades just enough for him to hear the quiet voice inside. Not the voice of craving, not the voice of fear, but the voice beneath. Them, the one that whispers, "You were not made to follow." This is the beginning of exile, not from the world, but from the illusions that held you hostage. And it is here in this space between what you were and what you must become that you begin to walk alone. At first, it feels like loss, like death, because everything familiar is stripped away. The applause, the approval, the roles you wore like armor gone, and all that remains is you naked, unperformed, real. You begin to see clearly. The way others cling, the way they avoid silence, the way they distract themselves to survive their own emptiness. But you're done surviving. You want something deeper, truer, cleaner, and that means walking a path most men never even notice because it cannot be followed. It must be carved alone, no guides, no maps, no applause, just the weight of your own presence and the patience to carry it. Epictetus once said, "If you want to be free, learn to wish things to be as they are." But freedom tastes strange at first, bitter, because it asks you to let go, not just of possessions, but of who you thought you had to be. The man who walks alone has no audience, no performance, no mask. He does not need to be understood. He does not need to be celebrated. He does not need to be seen. And in that invisibility, he becomes invincible. Because the world cannot punish the man who no longer fears being misunderstood, who no longer pleads for belonging, who no longer needs a place in the hierarchy. He walks beneath it, outside it, through it. Yes, there is loneliness on this path, a sacred kind, a loneliness not born of rejection, but of self-reclamation, because to walk alone is not to be without others. It is to no longer need them to remember who you are. You stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for recognition. You stop needing to be chosen. You choose yourself, and you walk. And as you walk, the world begins to shift. Not because it changed, but because you stopped bowing to it. You stopped chasing. You stopped explaining. You stopped decorating the cage. And slowly, a strange peace begins to bloom in the silence. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of sovereignty. The man who walks alone does not walk away from others. He walks toward himself, toward the part of him that was never for sale, never for show, never for negotiation. The man who walks alone has met the fire and stepped through it. And what burned away was everything he never needed. What remained was the beginning of real strength. Not power over others, power over self. The only power that endures. We've been taught that power means motion, louder, faster, more. That the strongest man is the one who dominates, who takes, who controls. But real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't clench its fists. It doesn't need to, because true power restrains itself. Restraint is not weakness. It is a sword still in its sheath, a fire that chooses not to consume, a storm that holds itself in the clouds. You see, the world confuses reaction with strength, but reaction is just slavery in disguise. Someone pushes you, you push back. Someone offends you, you burn with the need to respond. Someone questions. You scramble to prove, but each reaction proves the same thing. You are still owned, still fragile, still dependent on what others say, think, or do. Epictetus once said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." Mastery is not about dominance over others. It's about mastery over your own inner flame, to feel the fire rise and not let it own you, to hold the sword and not swing it, to know you could destroy but choose not to. That is terrifying to the world, because it cannot control a man who controls himself. We live in a culture that rewards outbursts, that worships outrage, that confuses chaos for passion. But you were not made to be a slave to impulse. You were made to govern it, to rule quietly over the storm inside you. The most dangerous man is not the one who explodes. It's the one who watches, who waits, who speaks only when silence has finished its work. Restraint is not repression, it's precision. It's knowing exactly where your energy goes and where it doesn't. Most men bleed power because they leak it everywhere, in arguments that don't matter, in status games they never chose, in performances they no longer believe. But you've seen the cost of scattering your presence, and something in you is tired of being everywhere except whole. Power begins when you withdraw, when you stop reacting, when you stop justifying, when you stop proving. That's when the fire settles into your bones and becomes warmth, and becomes clarity, and becomes command. Not control over others, but over your own breath, your own pace, your own soul. The man who restrains feels deeply, but he is not moved by every wave. He hears the noise, but it does not enter him. He could speak, but chooses silence. He could win, but no longer needs to. That is power, not in domination, but in detachment, not in noise, but in nerve, not in always advancing, but in knowing when to stay still. And let lesser men exhaust themselves trying to figure you out, because they can't. You are no longer in the game. You are the one who walked away from the board with your crown intact and your peace undisturbed. The man who restrains reigns, even in silence, especially in silence. After the silence, after the storm, after the shedding of names and masks, when you arrive at a strange stillness, no applause, no ambition, no craving, just breath and being, and the weight of your own presence undisturbed. This is not emptiness. This is not defeat. This is what's left when everything false has fallen away. You are no longer the man who chases, no longer the man who explains, no longer the man who performs his worth in front of an invisible crowd. You've walked through the fire. You've stood in the silence. You've tasted solitude, and it did not kill you. It crowned you. Because now there is nothing left to take from you. No hook the world can use to drag you back. No button it can press to make you kneel. You have nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to defend. And that makes you untouchable. Epictetus once said, "Only when you stop needing do you begin to see clearly. Clarity is not comfort, it's exposure. It shows you who you are without the things that used to define you. And what remains, if you're brave enough to see it, is the foundation of unshakable peace. Not the peace of safety, but the peace of sovereignty. The man who needs nothing walks through the world with quiet eyes. He does not advertise his strength. He carries it like a blade beneath the robe. He listens more than he speaks, moves when it's time, waits when it's not. He is feared by the loud and misunderstood by the shallow, because he cannot be played, cannot be lured, cannot be bought. He has what most men spend lifetimes chasing, centeredness. Not in image, but in essence. He chooses what to carry and what to burn. He does not cling to love out of fear. He does not chase wealth out of lack. He does not seek power to silence doubt. He knows that all of it, money, status, even affection, is only real when you can walk away from it without losing yourself. Because that's the test. Can you still be whole after letting go? Can you still be a man after laying down everything you once thought made you one? The man who needs nothing is not indifferent. He feels deeply, but he is not ruled by what he feels. He walks with softness, but his spine is made of stone. He is not here to dominate, but to witness, to live aligned, not addicted. And in a world built on hunger, his stillness is rebellion. His presence is disruption. His simplicity is a sword. You will not find this man on the stage. You will not see him shouting online. You may never know his name, but if you pass him on the street, you'll feel it. The calm, the weight, the silence that follows him like a shadow. Because a man like that doesn't need your attention. He's already home. No one will clap for you when you stop needing applause. There are no trophies for choosing peace over performance. No headlines for walking away instead of rising to fight. But that's the point. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't chase recognition because it no longer trades in approval. You came here looking for strength. You found silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, of no longer being pulled in 1,000 directions, of no longer trying to become someone, of no longer needing more to feel like enough. This is the turning point, not an achievement, but a shedding, not an ascent, but a return. Back to the man you were before the world told you what to want. Epictetus once said, "Wealth is the ability to be content with little." But you've gone further. You've discovered the wealth of being content with yourself. You don't need to win. You don't need to be known. You don't need to impress, possess, or prove, because you finally understand the man who needs nothing has already won. And though the world may never see your crown, you will feel its weight in the stillness of your soul.